The war in Afghanistan began on 27 April 1978, when the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan took power in a military coup, known as the SAW Revolution. Most of Afghanistan subsequently experienced uprisings against the PDPA government. The Soviet war in Afghanistan began in December 1979 to replace the existing communist government. Afghanistan's resistance forces, known as the Mujahideen, fought against the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Some factions received support by the United States, with the Pakistani ISI serving as the U.S. middleman, and Saudi Arabia. The Soviet Union had to withdraw its troops in February 1989. The Soviet-backed Afghan Communist government survived for 3 more years until the fall of Kabul in 1992. In 1992, the Afghan political parties agreed on the Peshawar Accords, which established the Islamic State of Afghanistan and appointed an interim government. Militia leader Gulbuddin Hekmatyar was opposed to the agreement and with Pakistani support started a bombardment campaign against Kabul. Additionally, 3 militias who had been able to occupy some suburbs of Kabul engaged in a violent war against each other. Regional powers such as Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, India and Uzbekistan, seeking influence over the geo-strategically located Afghanistan, each supported and in some cases controlled one of those militias. While Kabul and some other major cities witnessed most of the fighting during that period, most of the more rural parts of Afghanistan, which had seen especially massive bombardment by the Soviets and Communists, remained relatively calm. In late 1994, early 1995, as the Islamic State's Minister of Defense Ahmad Shah Massoud had been able to defeat most of the militias militarily in Kabul and had restored some calm to the capital, the Taliban emerged as a new faction threatening Kabul. The Taliban had initially emerged as a new force in the southern city of Kandahar, conquering many southern and central provinces not under Islamic State control in the course of 1994. In early 1995, as they launched a major operation against the capital Kabul, they suffered a devastating defeat against the Islamic State forces of Massoud in what many analysts saw as the movement's end. By 1996, however, they had regrouped with massive military support by Pakistan and financial support by Saudi Arabia. In September 1996, they took power in Kabul and established the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. The United Islamic Front was created under the leadership of Ahmad Shah Massoud as a military political resistance force against the Taliban Emirate, which was backed militarily by Pakistan's army and enforced by several thousand al-Qaeda fighters from Arab countries and Central Asia. Following the September 11 attacks inside the United States in 2001, NATO intervened in Afghanistan under Operation Enduring Freedom. The purpose of this was to defeat al-Qaeda, to remove the Taliban from power, and to create a viable democratic state. Rise and fall of communism. Prelude. From 1933 to 1973, Afghanistan witnessed a lengthy period of peace and relative stability. It was ruled as a monarchy by King Zahir Shah, who belonged to the Afghan Barakzai dynasty. In the 1960s, Afghanistan as a constitutional monarchy held limited parliamentary elections. Zahir Shah, who would become the last king of Afghanistan, was overthrown peacefully by his cousin Mohammed Daud Khan in 1973 after discontent with the monarchy was growing in the urban areas of Afghanistan. The country had witnessed several droughts and charges of corruption and poor economic policies were leveled against the ruling dynasty. Khan transformed the monarchy into a republic, with him becoming the first president of Afghanistan. He was supported by a faction of the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, Afghanistan's Communist Party, which had been founded in 1965 and enjoyed strong relations with the Soviet Union. Nematullah Nodumi writes, in The Rise of the Taliban in Afghanistan, Mass Mobilization, Civil War, and the Future of the Region. The establishment of the Republic of Afghanistan increased the Soviet investment in Afghanistan and the PDPA influence in the government's military and civil bodies. By 1976, alarmed by the growing power of the PDPA and the party's strong affiliation with the Soviet Union, Daud Khan tried to scale back the PDPA's influence. He dismissed PDPA members from their government posts, appointed conservative elements instead, and finally announced the dissolution of the PDPA, arresting senior party members. Communist coup on April 27, 1978. The PDPA and military units loyal to the PDPA killed Daud Khan, his immediate family, and bodyguards in a violent coup, and seized control of the capital Kabul. As the PDPA had chosen a weekend holiday, when many government employees were having a day off, as the time to conduct the coup, Daud Khan had not been able to activate fully in time the well-trained armed forces which remained loyal to him to counter the coup. The new PDPA government, led by a revolutionary council, did not enjoy the support of the masses. Therefore, it soon announced and implemented a hostile doctrine against any political dissent, whether inside or outside the party. The first communist leader in Afghanistan, Mohammed Saraki, was assassinated by his fellow communist Hafizullah Amin. Amin was known for his independent and nationalist inclinations, and was also seen by many as a ruthless leader. He has been accused of killing tens of thousands of Afghan civilians at Saraki and other national prisons. 27,000 politically motivated executions reportedly took place at Saraki prison alone. Soviet intervention and withdrawal. The Soviet Union intervened in Afghanistan on December 24, 1979. Amin was almost immediately deposed from power after he and 200 of his guards were killed on December 27 by Soviet Army Spetsnaz, to be replaced by Babrak Karmal. After deployment into Afghanistan, Soviet forces along with government forces would begin to engage in a protracted counterinsurgency war with Mujahideen fighters. The Soviet government realized that a military solution to the conflict would require far more troops. Because of this, they discussed troop withdrawals and searched for a political and peaceful solution as early as 1980. But they never took any serious steps in that direction until 1988. Early Soviet military reports confirmed the difficulties the Soviet army had while fighting on the mountainous terrain, for which the Soviet army had no training whatsoever. Parallels with the Vietnam War were frequently referred to by Soviet army officers. Policy failures, and the stalemate that ensued after the Soviet intervention, led the Soviet leadership to become highly critical of Karmal's leadership. Under Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet Union was able to depose Karmal and replace him with Mohammed Najibullah. Karmal's leadership was seen as a failure by the Soviet Union because of the rise of violence and crime during his administration. Throughout the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, troop convoys came under attack by Afghan rebel fighters. In all, 523 Soviet soldiers were killed during the withdrawal. The total withdrawal of all Soviet troops from Afghanistan was completed in February 1989. The last Soviet soldier to leave was Lieutenant General Boris Gromov, leader of the Soviet military operations in Afghanistan at the time of the Soviet invasion. In total, 14,453 Soviet soldiers died during the Afghan War. The Soviet war had a damaging impact on Afghanistan. Estimates of the Afghan deaths vary from 670,000 to 2 million. Fall of communism. After the Soviet withdrawal, the Republic of Afghanistan under Najibullah continued to face resistance from the various Mujahideen forces. Najibullah received funding and arms from the Soviet Union until 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed. For several years the Afghan army had actually increased their effectiveness past levels ever achieved during the Soviet military presence. But the government was dealt a major blow when Abdul Rashid Dostum, a leading general, created an alliance with the Shura-e-Nazar of Ahmad Shah Massoud. Large parts of the Afghan Communist government capitulated to the forces of Massoud in early 1992. After the Soviet defeat, the Wall Street Journal named Massoud the Afghan who won the Cold War. He had defeated the Soviet forces 9 times in his home region of the Panjshir Valley in northeastern Afghanistan. Pakistan tried to install Gulbuddin Hekmatyar in power in Afghanistan against the opposition of all other Mujahideen commanders and factions. As early as October 1990, the Inter-Services Intelligence had devised a plan for Hekmatyar to conduct a mass bombardment of the Afghan capital Kabul with possible Pakistani troop enforcements. This unilateral ISI Hekmatyar plan came although the 30 most important Mujahideen commanders had agreed on holding a conference inclusive of all Afghan groups to decide on a common future strategy. Peter Thompson reports that the protest by the other Mujahideen commanders was like a firestorm. Ahmad Zia Massoud, the brother of Ahmad Shah Massoud, said that his faction strongly opposed the plan and like other factions would take measures if any Pakistani troops reinforced Hekmatyar. Abdul Haq was reportedly so angry about the ISI plan that he was red in the face, and Nabi Mohammed, another commander, pointed out that Kabul's 2 million could not escape Hekmatyar's rocket bombardment. There would be a massacre. Massoud's, Abdul Haq's and Amin Wardak's representatives said that Hekmatyar's rocketing of Kabul would produce a civilian bloodbath. The United States finally put pressure on Pakistan to stop the 1990 plan, which was subsequently called off until 1992. Islamic State and foreign interference. After the fall of Najibullah's government in 1992, the Afghan political parties agreed on a power-sharing agreement, the Peshawar Accord. The Peshawar Accord created the Islamic State of Afghanistan and appointed an interim government for a transitional period to be followed by general, democratic elections. According to Human Rights Watch, the sovereignty of Afghanistan was vested formally in the Islamic State of Afghanistan, an entity created in April 1992, after the fall of the Soviet-backed Najibullah government. With the exception of Gulbuddin Hekmatyar's Hezb-e Islami, all of the parties were ostensibly unified under this government in April 1992. Hekmatyar's Hezb-e Islami, for its part, refused to recognize the government for most of the period discussed in this report and launched attacks against government forces in Kabul. Generally, shells and rockets fell everywhere. Gulbuddin Hekmatyar received operational, financial and military support from Pakistan. Afghanistan expert Amin Saikal concludes in Modern Afghanistan, A History of Struggle and Survival. Pakistan was keen to gear up for a breakthrough in Central Asia. Islamabad could not possibly expect the new Islamic government leaders to subordinate their own nationalist objectives in order to help Pakistan realize its regional ambitions. Had it not been for the ISI's logistic support and supply of a large number of rockets, Hekmatyar's forces would not have been able to target and destroy half of Kabul. In addition, Saudi Arabia and Iran, as competitors for regional hegemony, supported Afghan militias hostile towards each other. According to Human Rights Watch, Iran was assisting the Shia Hazara Hezbi Wardate forces of Abdul Ali Mazari, as Iran was attempting to maximize Wardate's military power and influence. Saudi Arabia supported the Wahhabita Abdul Rasul Sayyaf and his Ittihad-i-Islami faction. Conflict between the two militias soon escalated into a full-scale war. A publication by the George Washington University describes the situation. Outside forces saw instability in Afghanistan as an opportunity to press their own security and political agendas. Due to the sudden initiation of the war, working government departments police units or a system of justice and accountability for the newly created Islamic State of Afghanistan did not have time to form. Atrocities were committed by individuals of the different armed factions while Kabul descended into lawlessness and chaos is described in reports by Human Rights Watch and the Afghanistan Justice Project. Because of the chaos, some leaders increasingly had only nominal control over their commanders. For civilians there was little security from murder, rape and extortion. An estimated 25,000 people died during the most intense period of bombardment by Hekmatyar's Hezb Islami and the Junbash-i Milli forces of Abdul Rashid Dostum, who had created an alliance with Hekmatyar in 1994. 500,000 people fled Afghanistan. Human Rights Watch writes, rare ceasefires, usually negotiated by representatives of Ahmad Shah Massoud, Sibghatullah Mojadidi or Burhanuddin Rabbani, the interim government, or officials from the International Committee of the Red Cross, commonly collapsed within days. Taliban rise to power. Southern Afghanistan was under the control of neither foreign-backed militias nor the government in Kabul, but was ruled by local leaders such as Ghulam Sherzai and the militias. In 1994, the Taliban also developed in Afghanistan as a politico-religious force, reportedly in opposition to the tyranny of the local governor. Mullah Omar started his movement with fewer than 50 armed madrasa students in his hometown of Kandahar. When the Taliban took control of the city in 1994, they forced the surrender of dozens of local Pashtun leaders who had presided over a situation of complete lawlessness and atrocities. In 1994, the Taliban took power in several provinces in southern and central Afghanistan. In late 1994, most of the militia factions which had been fighting in the battle for control of Kabul were defeated militarily by forces of the Islamic State's Secretary of Defense Ahmad Shah Massoud. Bombardment of the capital came to a halt. Massoud tried to initiate a nationwide political process with the goal of national consolidation and democratic elections, also inviting the Taliban to join the process. Massoud had united political and cultural personalities, governors, commanders, clergymen and representatives to reach a lasting agreement. Massoud, like most people in Afghanistan, saw this conference as a small hope for democracy and for free elections. His favorite for candidacy to the presidency was Dr. Mohammed Yusuf, the first democratic prime minister under Zahir Shah, the former king. In the first meeting, representatives from 15 different Afghan provinces met. In the second meeting, there were already 25 provinces participating. Massoud went unarmed to talk to several Taliban leaders in Maidan Shah, but the Taliban declined to join this political process. When Massoud returned safely, the Taliban leader who had received him as his guest paid with his life. He was killed by other senior Taliban for failing to execute Massoud while the possibility was there. The Taliban started shelling Kabul in early 1995 but were defeated by forces of the Islamic State government under Ahmad Shah Massoud. Amnesty International, referring to the Taliban offensive, wrote in a 1995 report, "This is the first time in several months that Kabul civilians have become the targets of rocket attacks and shelling aimed at residential areas in the city." The Taliban's early victories in 1994 were followed by a series of defeats that resulted in heavy losses. Pakistan provided strong support to the Taliban. Many analysts like Amin Saikal describe the Taliban as developing into a proxy force for Pakistan's regional interests, which the Taliban decline. On September 26, 1996, as the Taliban, with military support by Pakistan and financial support by Saudi Arabia, prepared for another major offensive, Massoud ordered a full retreat from Kabul. The Taliban seized Kabul on September 27, 1996, and established the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan.